Hi, I'm Diane Germain, and I am a watercolorist and art teacher, and I live in Slidell, Louisiana on the North Shore of Lake Pontchartrain. Today I'm going to be showing you the value of using a limited palette. That is, picking a red, a yellow, and a blue, the primary colors, using those three colors to avoid using green, orange, and purple tube colors or any browns and grays. And in these four paintings that I have right here, I used primarily a red, a yellow, and a blue. For example, in a painting, I may have used the blue of a cerulean blue and a yellow of a yellow ochre and a red of a quin red. And in another painting, it would have been three different primaries, but I stuck with those throughout the entire painting, and I saw great value in doing this. I'd like to discuss right now what is a limited palette and why do I want to seek to have one. A limited palette for me is different from the palettes found by other artists. Every artist has their own preferred pigments. These are the ones I am using now, and in a few months it may change somewhat. But I'd like to share with you the why of what I've chosen for my limited palette. And as we proceed in this video today, I will take the ones that just one red, one yellow, and one blue to show you how I can really eliminate the pigments of green, orange, and purple on my palette. And I've really that was the big thing for me when I could do that, to get those off of my palette, because they seemed so artificial and cold, and the whole painting wasn't unified for me. So I'm going to just show you why I chose these pigments, and then why I go down to 3 today to show you in a demo the value of those particular ones. Yellow, most artists have just 2 yellows on their palette. They may have a cadmium yellow light or medium. This is a pretty strong pigment, and I find that the Hansa yellow light, I can get everything I want out of a primary yellow with just using the Hansa yellow light. This is Daniel Smith, but any great professional series like Winsor & Newton, Daniel Smith, Holbein, Da Vinci, M. Graham, there's so many of them. You just have to find what you like. So my workhorse on my yellow is that. These 3 colors right here, an orange red, and a cadmium red, I don't really use them that much in my paintings, but I have them here more for just dabbing into them at the very end of a painting, and I just want maybe a more of a accent colors in the painting. Sometimes I even use them in my landscapes, cityscapes, for making figures and getting the warmth of the skin. But these 2 colors right here, these 2 reds, are the ones that I usually go to most of the time. This one right here is a quinacridone red. Actually, this is the rose on here because I just finished doing a portrait of a young boy. And when I do portraits, I use the quinacridone rose. And I use the combination of the rose and the yellow ochre for the skin color, maybe a little bit of ultramarine blue in it too. But everybody gets to know the colors that they like, but it's a red, yellow, and a blue. Basically, for most of my painting, I'm seeking to use a red, a yellow, and a blue to form the other colors. And this one right here is permanent alizarin crimson. Get the permanent, don't just get alizarin crimson. It tends to be a fading color, a fugitive color, so you want to get the permanent in there. We're going to be using this today in our demo, and this is burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is what I like to use in the latter stages of my painting, and I mix that with an ultramarine blue to get some beautiful darks. So this is not the one this is not what I use at all in my first stage of underpainting. It's I used the yellows or the yellow ochre. This one right here is a quinacridone gold, and I just recently put this on my palette with this Payne's Gray, and I'll show you in another video on mixing greens how beautifully these can be used to mix greens, but this is in the latter stages of my painting also. I don't put this in my first underpainting. Here's a yellow ochre, which is I either use this yellow or this yellow in my underpainting, depending on the time of the day. If it's in the evening, I'll use that. It gives a lower intensity of the yellow. If it's a bright sunny day and I want to get some really nice lively colors in my greens and in my orange by mixing red and yellow, I'll use this yellow. And then this one here is neutral tint. I just recently put this on my palette. It's primarily in the latter stages of my painting when I really want to get some powerful darks, a strong contrast in the focal area. And then this is my ultramarine blue here, my cobalt blue, and my cerulean blue. These are the ones that I generally use, more so the ultramarine blue. The cobalt it used to be my favorite, but I don't use it that much anymore. And the cerulean, I do like to use that sometimes it replaces this. So these two probably are most common of what I'm going to. These blues here are for accents. That's the cobalt turquoise and the cobalt teal, or I think maybe just the opposite. But anyway, when I do use it, I squeeze a little fresh mixture of it, and I'll use that mostly as accents. And then this is the Payne's Gray, which I use later, like I said, with the gold. So, but for our purposes today, I'm going to be using the ultramarine blue, the permanent alizarin crimson, and the Hansa yellow light. Here is a color wheel that I just made so that we could kind of get a sense of where I'm going with the primary colors of red, yellow, and blue. And each of the primary colors, when they mix together, they get a secondary color. Red and blue here get purple, and blue and yellow have green, and yellow and red, orange. None of these are pure. The best, let me rephrase that. No pigment out of a tube will give you the best primary you could possibly get for red. Or yellow or blue. They all have something in them that tends to have a bias. For example, this is alizarin crimson, and it kind of tends to be a little bit biased toward the blue or the cooler side of the color wheel. But for this lesson, we're just going to say this is a red, and this Hansa yellow that I'll be using, we're going to say that's our yellow, and the blue is the ultramarine blue. So these three, and then we're going to mix them together. But what we're going to do in this thing is, in this video, is I'm going to try to show you how to make a nice flat wash as I did on here, and how to mix them. What I'm going to do right now is I'm using part of my John Pike original palette, and this is not the orientation I usually use, but because I wanted to get everything in this video, I have the permanent alizarin crimson is right down in the corner right here, and my water I'm putting on the palette here, which I usually don't, and my sponge is way up here, and it's a what I call a thirsty or a moist brush. If you have this hard and dried, it is not going to receive any water. This is the way I test how much water. If I did this and then I put it right onto my paper with the pigment, I couldn't really judge how much water to pigment. So what I do is I usually dip my brush into the water, then I touch it a few times like this, and I can feel how much water, because now it's not going to be dripping off of the edge of the brush. But if I had it like this, you can see it's dripping off, and I just can't just decide how much water to pigment to use there. So I did that, and now I'm going to go into the paint, and I use a fresh little squirt of paint. This is drying back here, so I can't really feel the paint to the water if it's too hard, and I have to kind of rub, and it's bad on the point of my brush. I have this at an angle. It's on a gator board, or you can use any kind of water resistant board underneath here. I tape the edges. This is the back side of a piece of 140 Arches paper. This is what I use for my exercises. If I messed up a painting or I did an exercise on one side, I can use the other side. Now I'm going to show you right now when I go to fill this in that I'm going to be using a wash that's going to be a flat wash. We consider that a flat wash, where it's going to be pretty much the same from the top to the bottom. And the way you do that is to put it on at least a 15-degree angle. And you make sure you have enough pigment. And I'm going back in here. This time I did go into the water and did put it in this mixture because I needed a little bit more water. Most of the time I go water to the sponge and then to the paint. So here I have a good amount to cover that right there. And what I want to do is when I start, and this paintbrush I'm using is an Escoda 16 Perla synthetic. I love it. It holds a nice point and it's not expensive. So here if I just did this and I went all the way down with that little bit amount of paint, I would not have a really pretty wash. So what I'm going to be doing is watching to see, do you see this bead? If I don't, usually when I start off, because the paper is dry, it's absorbing a lot of what I'm putting on here. So I go back in and just touch that. So when I'm going down the paper, I'm watching that, what they call a bead, that it's accumulating there. If I keep that bead going and watch my edges and go back and get some more, but you see, if I get ahead of it, I'm not going to have a nice flat wash that's even. Just get that bead to flow down. When it starts to looks like you're losing it, go back in. This is why you want to be sure to make as much of a pool of your red as you can in the very beginning, because you see now I'm starting to run out and I'm a little bit concerned I may not make it to the end, and I will, but this is why you want to have a little bit more. Now, if I wanted to get this edge a little bit closer, I could just do that. But make sure I have that bead. And all the moisture from the top will be coming down. And I try not to go back up in here. I just saw a little white area, and I could just touch it. As long as this is moist and the bead is moving down, I'm pretty safe. And I'm using the side of my brush, not just the tip, because if I use the tip, then I'll wear out the beauty of the tip on the brush. Now, as I come down to the edge here, I'm careful to try to just move that bead and get that just right. All right, so we'll put my yellow right here. I think I'll use the pencil instead of the marker. It didn't work as well as I'd like. So this is called Hansa Yellow Light. All right. And I squeezed a little bit, like a bean size, over the existing paint I already had that had dried on the surface, and that's okay. So when it sits on top, it'll start refreshing what's underneath. So don't worry about that. Again, I have my paper, my 140 Arches. It's on an angle. It's just taped to this board. And I'm going to wet my brush, tap it on the surface of the sponge, and then go into my pigment, put it down here, and then I work it. I work it into a nice puddle, and I feel the consistency. And that's pretty good. And what I need to do is probably add a little bit more. And I'm seeing that there's a little red that was mixed in my that little well before. So I'm getting a little red that's coming through. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some of that I saw, and I'm going to go into this. It's on my brush. Another point is you clean your brush really well before you go into a new color. And I didn't do that. So let's go up here. Now, there you go. There's better. I can still see some of that, but I'm going to just wet this into a nice puddle and make sure that I'm going to have enough to go through this whole thing. I'm trying to avoid that red on my brush that I had before. So I touch this and I see it's moist, but I see a puddle here, a bead, and I see it when I do it here. Yes. So then I can go a little bit further, but I don't go much further than that. I don't go any further than that bead. See, I can play if I lightly hit the surface here, not scrubbing into the paper, and I have some play in here until that bead starts to dry out. So I'm going to go back in here and I'm loading my paintbrush through the whole paintbrush, and then I can go a little bit faster as long as I don't go ahead of the bead. And I'm feeling it get dry here, and I'm losing the bead. So I go back and I fill up the paintbrush again, and I just make sure it's on all sides, all the way up to the ferrule, as well as close to the ferrule as I can get it. You don't want to start painting down here and then go up. Watercolor likes to go with gravity, and so I usually paint my paintings where I start with the sky or at the top of the page and I come down. Now this is going to be nice. And let's say I wanted to have something to scoop up down here. You're not going to see it because it's yellow very much, but there's a little bit. So I clean my brush, tap, tap, tap on the edge of the water. I don't know if you can see this, tap, tap, tap. Dry it on the sponge, and I just drop the brush. And then I'll just come over here, and I take, you see there was still excess water on here. And then I go and I just take, it's like a vacuum cleaner, and vacuum it up. What I did was I refreshed my color here on the palette because it had dried somewhat, and I squeezed a little bit more. And so now I'm going to go straight into this. And a lot of times you'll see ultramarine blue or you'll see French ultramarine blue. They're both the same. So this one actually is just an ultramarine blue. So here I am, and I'm just going to get this mixture, and that should be enough to get into that. I'm going to fill the brush so that it's soaked. And then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to touch. This one you really will be able to see the beads so much more. I love ultramarine blue. Now you see that bead? I could go a ways more because it's working with me. It's following me. It's still there, right here. So I can still go down. So now I'm going to go back and get some more. Remember, I don't want to race ahead of that bead. This is how I work all my areas in my painting. I keep that bead so that maybe even I might take some of the red and just merge it into that, and it behaves beautifully when you have that bead to play with other colors. Now see, the bead's going away, so I go back in here and I scoop and I get the paint on here and I refresh my bead. This is the key to getting some beautiful, this is a flat wash where I have not added any other color to it. If I added the red to it, I would be calling that a merging of merged wash, mingling of other colors together. I'm going to go back and get some more because I want to show you really mopping up that extra. There we have a whole lot. This will show you well how to do this thirsty brush. All right, so now I go in here and clean my brush, tap, 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 roll it onto the sponge to get the extra out. Then I take and I roll it on here. Now I go here and I use the tip and I come around like I'm a vacuum cleaner. I don't go way up into here because this is starting to dry up here. I stay in the wet pool, and I just wipe it off down here, and I watch it because sometimes it takes a little bit of time. Now you see this rough area. you know, later on in another video, right now I can soften those edges, right, like doing like that, but I'll show you also how to soften edges, how I do that in my paintings. If I went in here and I just tried to soften from the inside with all this moist, beautiful paint, it would just make a big old oozle or background. So I don't want to do that. Okay. So here we go. We have red, yellow, and blue. And remember I was telling you about this area. It seems like I just didn't use as much pigment. The pigment was mostly up here, and then when I came here, I might have had a little bit more water in the mixture, but it's not a bad flat wash. This is going to be gorgeous, and this one is beautiful. And so that is what I want, and what I'm going to show you in my next video on using a triad is how these three colors, I can use them in combinations, yellow and red together, and get orangey tones, some yellow orange, some red orange, and that's what I do in my painting. I don't pull. I may have these on. I do have these on my palette, but I mainly have these on my palette so that in the last stage of my painting, if I find that an area just needs to be popped with a really bright color, I'll go into them and I'll get them. But just taking these three, I wanted to show you how many colors you could make, how many mixtures of colors you can make, and you don't have to have a tube of yellow, of green, a tube of purple, a tube of orange. Even you don't have to have burnt sienna, yellow ochre. There's a bunch of colors that these combinations can make that you can get out of a tube, but when they're mixed together in some beautiful ways, they are even prettier and more exciting to the eye when you stay away from the secondary pigment tubes. Okay, so here, let me get started. And first of all, I want you to notice there is actually, if you squint your eyes, these three colors go into different value ranges. Yellow is in the light range, the red is in the middle range of values, and the blue is in the mid to darker range of values. And this is important to know. So if I wanted to stay with, mixed yellow and blue, and knowing I'm going to get green, and I want to stay with a lighter value of green, then I'm careful not to add too much of this darker value because it can overpower the yellow. And vice versa. If I want to get into a really light value yellow-orange, I'm going to add less of the red to it. So I'll show you that. So I put some puddles of color here, and I'm going to start off with the lighter color. Usually that's what you want to do. And so I'm just going to put that down. I'm going to go into the red and just touch it and see what happens. Go into it a little bit more here and just play. I'm going to go back into my yellow and see what happens when these colors merge. Maybe if I added a little bit stronger yellow in here, what happens. And notice how yellow is very bossy, I call it. It wants to take over the area. It doesn't like to mingle as much as, say, red and blue together, and you'll see that in a minute. But say you wanted to have more of a red orange. So you'd start off with red, and then you'd go into your yellow, and I'm cleaning my brush between, and then I put that in there. And you see how red is more accepting of the yellow into it than it was over here with going into this yellow. Look how beautiful that is. And if I want to make it even more, sometimes if I had that much color on, I could sneak and get a little bit more into the pigment without having to wash and clean the brush. Just coming in here. And look at that beautiful color. I love, love, love all of that. And notice, remember I was telling you about the bead. Look at that bead. You move that bead, and as much as you can keep on working once you have that bead, but where it's starting to dry up here, it doesn't work as well. So as long as it's wet and it's got a bead, you can come back there and you can add more color to it. And let's go into red and blue together. So these mix very well together. So here I'm going to start with the red, put it in here. I'm going to add a little bit more because it's kind of dry. I want to have that bead when I'm mixing my colors too. And I'm going to clean off the red. I'm going to go into the blue, and I'm going to touch it in here. And I'll pull. Now look at that purple happening. Let's go back into the red because I want this to be more red purple than blue purple. Look at those purples. They're gorgeous. This is still wet here, so I can play. I can even go back in and touch strong red, and I can pull my paper up and let that move, and that's what I want you to do. I want you to play. And then I'm going to show you how to work the edge here. I clean my brush, get a little bit of the excess water off, and say this is real rough. I come in from the dry side, and now that one exploded because it's too wet. Let's see. Just running it along the edge to soften that edge. This takes a little technique, but this exercise is not really about that. But look what's happening with these gorgeous colors over here. So now I'm going to put blue down first. I'm going to put a real, I told you with that, go back in there, and the more of this you have with that bead, the happier your mixture is going to be. Now I want it mostly the blue this time. I want a blue purple. There we go. And I'm just moving that bead. Look at the different purples I can get. You can get more of a blue purple there, red purple here. I'm going to come in here and look at that. Gorgeous, glowing, beautiful. And that makes me happy, those kind of things. And then when the water pools, the color pools down here, remember I just wash my brush, get the excess off, and then go in here and just pull up that extra bead of color. And it'll be nice. And even if you can kind of soften just a little bit around the edge here while you're doing it. Because it's running down, I could go in here, but this is running down here, so you don't want to go in from the top here at all. This is okay. This is not okay. Okay, so that's pretty. So let's go now and play with yellow going to blue. Okay, so here's yellow. Now, that's dry. You see how dry that is? All right, so I'll go back in, scoop it up. I want that bead. All right, so let's see how these two. There are better mixtures of yellow with a different blue, like cobalt will give you a brighter, happier green, like for spring colors. This one tends to give you just, since it's so dark and this is so light, you'll see it's not, it is a nice green, but we're going to want to go yellow green here. But when it dries, it won't be totally bright. But it's more like nature. This is more like the greens you see in nature. Also, a little hint here. When you're mixing your greens on your paper and it gets to be so green and you have so much green and yellow and blue mixed together making green, sometimes I'll come in and I'll add a tad of some type of red. And that can just make it more like or what you see out in life, in real life. Just that little contrast to bring in the red, it makes this pop up as more brilliant, more exciting. Okay, and now we're going to go with the blue first. A soupy blue. Okay, you see my mixture right there, my bead. And now I'm going to clean my brush before going into my yellow. Really have to work that off and get some more yellow in here, and then I'm going to pop that in there and see where we go. This is a blue-green. Again, you can play these colors by picking that up and letting them flow together. I don't know if you can see that. Okay. And then one more thing I'm going to do in this lesson is show you the combination of red, yellow, and blue together. It makes some gorgeous, gorgeous luminous, I call them, grays and browns. And that's what I really, really use a lot in my paintings, is that beautiful gray. So here we go. We're going to add some yellow first. Make this yellow. Look at that yellow green. It had a little bit of blue on it. That's good. And then we're going to go into the red, and we're going to add some blue. Now you can see I'm getting a beautiful brown. This is a brown. Now, I'm going to show you in a big circle kind of thing how I can go from that brown to more of a, I would call that a warm brown, to a cool brown. Now, that's still saying too much blue, so we're going to overpower that with some red. Now we got purple. We're going to go into it with the yellow. Ooh, look at that. All right, and I can even go back and add more blue. I can add more red. I want you to see, oh, the color combination. Isn't that gorgeous? Wow. And now I'm going to go with more yellow, starting with yellow. Yellow-green here. I'm going to add some red. Now I'm getting to more like the raw siennas and the burnt siennas that are out of the tube, and you don't have to have that color on your palette. You can make it. And let's do a little bit more of a burnt sienna. Okay, we start, ooh, that's right there. It's just a nice burnt sienna. Hardly have to have any blue, but we can. Ah, these are gorgeous colors. This is why I like the combination. So, and then I can, like I said, I can make that move by just doing that, leaning this thing back and forth and letting it dry on its own. Warning, do not go in here while this is so wet and beautiful and do the blow dryer, hair dryer on it to dry it. Because what it's going to do is going to push. This part will be heating up and drying, and this part will be still wet, and you won't get the beautiful flow of colors together. And that's what I love about watercolor, is that flow of color together. Now, and there is a time when this starts to lose its sheen, and this area right here is a little bit faster than all of this. And in another video, I can show you when it gets to that point of it's just losing its sheen is when you can use your fingernail or use a palette knife or use a knife, and you can pull out, say, branch work or even trees, small trunks of trees, whatever. And it's starting to get there right now. But if you do it too fast and it's wet like this, it just all fills in and it gets dark on you. Look at this. Look at that gorgeousness. Oh, it's beautiful. Love watercolor.